All right. So welcome back to the podcast, everyone. How you doing, Rhoads?
Doing well. How you doing, Harley?
I'm doing good. Today's guest is Jack Smith. Hi, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing good. And you guys?
We're doing great.
Doing great.
And we're going to be talking to Jack about his upcoming trip. He's going to be making coast to coast from west to east. But how many times in the meantime have you gone from coast to coast, and what kind of vehicles have you used in the past?
Well, quite a few times. Starting back in 1976, a couple of buddies and I pushed our skateboards from Oregon to Virginia, and we did it via relay technique. We call the leapfrog relay. And then ended up doing that 3 more times over the years in 84, 2003, and 2013. 2018,
Oh my gosh.
my wife was my support vehicle driver, and I rode an electric skateboard across America from Eugene, Oregon to Washington, D.C. And then drove an electric 1964 VW bus that had been converted to electric. We followed the route of the first guy to drive a car across America back in 1903. And then on the return trip, we followed the Lincoln Highway, the 1913 version of the Lincoln Highway, and that was New York to San Francisco. And then in 2023, my wife and I used the same VW bus, that electric one that was loaned to us by the guys at EV West, and we had it shipped to Chicago, and then we went from Chicago to Santa Monica on Route 66. And then this last year in 2024, I did an electric bicycle ride across the country from San Francisco to New York, following the route of the first guy to ride a motorcycle back across the country back in 1903, a guy named George Wyman.
Did you pick the right roads?
Right.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Historical.
Can you hear him?
Now I just raised up my volume just a bit.
Okay.
There we go.
No,
Yeah.
he was saying that you picked the right roads.
Yeah, it was, especially, on the skateboards, even more than the bicycle, choosing the right roads or trying to
Right.
is key. In the van, you have a little bit more leeway. The bicycle, same kind of thing. I had a little bit more leeway. You had to, worry about places to charge. But on the bicycle, it wasn't a big deal because I just roll the bicycle into the motel room at night and charge up. You didn't need any special charging system.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So this summer, what month is it? You're going to be doing the TransAmerica Trail?
Well, it's got to be sometime. You got to start I want to start mid to late July, early August, because from what I've been reading, you have to get across, the Rockies before the snow falls. And I'm actually going to be going east to west. I'm going to transport whatever bike I have and start in West Virginia.
Okay.
And then end up in Astoria, Oregon.
Okay. Awesome. So what's inspired you to do this on an electric motorcycle? Is it just because of the other ways you've done it? Now you just want to try an electric bike on the TransAmerica?
Yeah, you nailed it. I've done it. I'm calling it. What am I calling it? I had a little name. I was calling it the Superfecta. So 4 times, because I want to do a cross country 4 times via electric vehicle.
Okay.
So I've done electric skateboard, electric bicycle, electric van, electric bus, whatever you want to call it, and now electric motorcycle. So that's, hopefully you'll finish it up.
Awesome.
That's incredible. And why again, east to west, just to mix it up?
East to west, so I end up back here on the West Coast. And one thing I've found really on all of my journeys across the country, when you start in the West, everything's fun until you get to about Illinois. And then there's just so many more people, narrower roads, more traffic. It's just not quite as fun. So I've done all my trips east to west to east.
Mm-hmm.
A couple summers ago, I helped out. I put together a team of younger skaters, long distance skateboarders, to actually break my record from 2023 or 2013 when we skated cross country. A team of us skated across country, 4 of us, and we did it in 21 days. And so I thought, it's actually a sport now, long distance skating. And so
Okay.
I gathered together 4 really good long distance pushers. My son and I volunteered to be their support team, and I convinced them to do it from east to west, so they could enjoy the western part of the country. And they finished it in 17 days and 6 hours. So they smoked
Oh
our
my
record.
gosh. Yeah, they crushed it, huh?
And the other thing we've always heard is if you go west to east, you'll have a tailwind. Not on a single one of my trips did that work out. As soon as we got, we'd get over the Rockies and we'd be all excited. Now we're going to be on the Great Plains. We're going to have a tailwind. It's going to be easy. No, we always had a headwind. So you can throw that out the window.
So you're hoping that it holds true this time.
Yeah.
You get a tailwind, but going from east to west.
Yeah. And, it's with the electric motorcycle, they're going to be more powerful, of course, than the electric bike, and, of course, electric skateboard.
Right. So, how are you planning and preparing for the uniqueness of this trip?
Well, first thing, and I've got to talk to you guys about this, is
don't talk to us about it. We got no idea.
I've got to get a motorcycle license. I've never had a motorcycle license, and I know you guys teach some of the courses.
Absolutely.
So I'll need to do that. And then first, order of business is finding an electric bike, electric motorcycle, and I've reached out to a couple companies, haven't heard back yet. And sometimes it takes a while. And then I've just been watching a ton of YouTube videos and looking at the route. And, there's some offshoots of the route. And it looks like there's a lot of bailout points where if you need to get to civilization again, you can, bail out, along the trail and get to a hotel or get to, a restaurant, whatever you may need, campground. So, and some guys modify it, it looks like. Guys that aren't quite as skilled on riding, maybe single track stuff, they'll change it up and take another road along that section. So I'm just trying to figure out, how much of the actual trail I want to stay on, or that I have the ability to stay on. So,
what
some
trail?
of the stuff I've seen looks pretty gnarly.
What trail or route are you following? Is it like another historical thing like the you're planning?
No,
or?
It's something called the TransAmerica Trail, TAT for short. And it's a fellow, I can't think of his last name, a fellow from Mississippi, Sam, I can't think of his last name, but he, avid motorcycle rider, and lives in Mississippi. And a number of years ago, he just went out one day, and I wonder how far I could ride without being on a paved road. And he got like halfway across the state, and then he kept going. And over 9 years, he just kept going. And eventually established this trail that is about 80% you're off of paved surfaces. You're on dirt, gravel, like in the Rockies and some of those places. Out by, you get to Colorado, Utah. You can be on single track, just national forest trails. So it's a lot of different surfaces to be on.
Yeah, like you said, some of it could be quite gnarly, I guess, for sure.
Yeah, some of the up in the mountains, it looks quite gnarly. There's some crazy, depending on time of year you go, some stream crossings that you have to do. So yeah, it's I think I've only done one stream crossing on all the trips I've done, and I just took off my shoes and walked across the stream. And when I was doing the electric board trip, never really went through a 2-foot deep stream or something.
Right. Oh God. So there's got to be some highlights on the TransAmerica Trail that you're really looking forward to experiencing.
Yeah, I like anything that gets you off the beaten path. I like, I love going through the small towns. I I'm really looking forward to some of the easier Forest Service roads that go through the national forest, especially, like I said, in Colorado. And I'm hoping that a buddy of mine is going to come along. Actually, two guys have expressed interest. One fellow is the guy who went with me in one of the electric bus trips.
Mm-hmm.
And the other friend is a skateboarder, but lifelong motorcycle guy from West Virginia. And, he's ridden every type of motorcycle you can imagine. He's still right. He's just retired, so he has time. He's ridden, he's just out the other day, did 70 miles on his dirt bike. So he'd be a good guy to have, come along. And I told him, bring a rope in case I run out of battery. I said, I'm not a purist. If you got to tow me, you can tow me. So, yeah, he'll be definitely a good guy. A guy named Dennis Blevins.
Okay. So how many people will you have on your team?
This will be, I'm hoping that both of them will come. So we would have three, but, if there's just two of us, that's fine as well.
Okay.
Why did you settle on this electric motorcycle?
Just to complete the 4 different ways
factor, what do you call it?
Yes, the superfecta.
Superfecta.
I thought about calling it the quadfecta, but then I thought people would think I'd be riding a quad or something.
Okay.
So I just thought it'd be neat to be the first person to cross the country on 4 different types of electric transportation.
Yeah, that'd be quite something. You have to check in with the Guinness Book of Records to see if that's been done before.
Yeah, we were in the Guinness Record Book in the very early 2000s for some of our early trips across the 76 and 84 trip. We're in the Guinness Book of World Records, but nowadays that's a big business. The whole Guinness thing to get. You have all kinds of paperwork, all kinds of logs. You have to pay for it, So it's like,
it's almost got a little bit controversial. There's what's his name, Adam Sandoval. He's arranged. I think he's had the biggest group of motorcycles or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But he got the most motorcycles together in one spot at one time and rode. Right. And he holds the record, but for some reason Guinness isn't acknowledging it.
Is it?
Yeah. But he's like, no, I'm the world record holder, so be it. So
one guy that I've kind of been watching some videos of, and I need to watch the complete movies. You guys may have seen them. Are the documentaries by Ewan McGregor?
Oh yeah,
I haven't seen those.
Yeah, long way up. Long way around.
Yeah, long way around. There's 2 of them. Long way around and something like that. Yeah.
And the guy, my buddy who owns EV West, Michael Bream, he's built a couple electric vehicles for Ewan over the years. So he's become friends with him. And I asked him the other day, I said, hey, does Ewan still have those motorcycles he used? And he said, well, I don't know, but I'll check with him. But I think they were Harleys, electric Harleys that they used.
All right.
But they had incredible sponsorship. Rivian, the car company, got involved. They had to build charging stations along the way.
So that was going to bring me to my next question was like, how are you going to charge the bike?
Well, the 2 that I've been looking at, both of them allow for either 110 charging, so hotel room, convenience store. Like on the electric bike trip, I had 2 batteries, and I would take off in the morning with both batteries. And when I got to, a bar or 2 left, I'd take that battery off, give it to my support guy, and he would drive 30, 40 miles out in front of me, find a convenience store, and ask if we could use this outside plug, and he would start charging that battery. Okay. And then both these bikes also allow for what they call level 2 charging, which is faster, of course, than a 110. So, I'll just have to. That's a big part of it, especially when we did the. It wasn't a big deal on the electric skateboard because we could charge in the van that we had throughout the day. We had an inverter set up, but on the electric Volkswagen trip, we planned out every night where we would stop, because that's how we were able to do this, by staying in RV parks every night.
Oh, that would make sense.
We plugged in like we were an RV, And in the morning, we had a full battery.
Mm.
We very rarely charge during the day. If we happen to see a place, like we stop for lunch and, oh, look, there's the city hall, or a college campus. They've got some chargers we'd plug in for a little bit.
What about modifications to the motorcycle? Can you modify it for your charging?
There's a guy who's done the Trans-Am Trail, and his wife went along with him. She rode a conventional motorcycle, and he rode a Zero motorcycle. They're out of Santa Cruz, and he made some modifications. I've been trying to get a hold of him to see what actually he did to it, but I think they were mainly charging modifications so he could charge a little bit faster. So I would like to do it stock. I think it means more for a company if their bike, does something stock across the country.
Sure.
So it just matter of what they want to do.
Yeah.
What their goals may be.
I mean, what do you think the longest range that you're going to get out of the bike?
Well, it's interesting. The one bike I've been looking at, it says it has different levels of range depending on, of course, how you ride it. And one of the levels is beginner because they figure you're going slower, so you get more range. That would fit me. But most of them, these two are showing, 105, 110 miles of range. That's probably paved surfaces, so you got to cut that down a little bit, on paved surfaces. So just, once I settle on a bike, it'll be, then the real hard part comes figuring out, where I can charge along the way.
I was going to say that's going to cause a lot of anxiety. You're going to be like, oh, I'm getting close. Nowhere in sight. So
we had a little bit of that on the electric Volkswagen. There was one night, one evening, late in the day. I think we were in Nebraska. And we got down to we always wanted to end the day with like 20% buffer left.
Okay.
Well, we got down below 20. We got down to 15%. And, we were still like, 20, 25 miles from our campground. And we ended up on dirt roads. And we couldn't remember if the headlights drew off the battery that ran the motor or if it drew off the 12 volt. So we were so afraid of running out of juice that we'd run without the lights until we saw headlights coming towards us. And then we'd turn our headlights on. And when they passed, we'd turn the headlights off. Turns out they were running off the 12 volt.
Still better be safe than sorry, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But we never, and then when my wife and I did the trip, we never had, because I knew the vehicle a lot better by then. And we never had any really range anxiety at all.
Yeah.
How would you compare the electric bike to a traditional bike?
That's a good question. A lot of people are still of the mindset, oh, you're cheating on an electric bike. And I pedaled the thing. The only time I would run just full throttle on it or just exclusively use a throttle was when I was in town or in a city and I had to get in. I was at a stoplight and I had to get in up to speed quickly to get into the flow of traffic. I would use the throttle. But the rest of the time I was pedaling. The bike did not have any gears as far as like a derailleur on a regular bicycle where you have 5 or 10, 15 speeds. Yeah. This was a single speed.
Oh.
I did have 5 levels of assist.
Okay.
And I was mainly running on the flat ground, I was running level 1, level 2. When I got into the hills, I ran level 2, level 3. But most of the time, I was usually in level 2 and pedaling because, it was just gave me something to do and it extended the range by pedaling rather than being on the throttle all the time.
Okay. And on a personal level, you mentioned like this is going to be your, I can't remember what you said now, not four factor. Is it four factor you called it?
Super factor.
Super factor. So
Super
on a personal level, what does this trip mean to you? Is this just like, okay, if I do the 4, I've completed my goal. I've completed it 4 different ways, which nobody else has done before.
Yeah, I think if I'm able to pull this one off, I'll be done with the electric side of things. Okay. And who knows, something could come up in the future for some other crossing or maybe in a different country. I don't know, but I'm 68, and I'm still looking for things to do. It keeps you young.
That's great.
How has this shaped your life, and how the past experiences shaped your life? How's this one going to shape your life even further?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. That first trip I did back in 1976, I was 19 years old, and of course I'd never done anything like that. A trip like that had never been done on a skateboard. And more than anything, that opened up my eyes to, if you want to do something, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just go and figure it out as you're going along. That's what we did. And it gave me the confidence to, try different things in the future, not only trips like that or journeys, but even just in personal life. I'm tired of this job. I'm going to try a new job.
Yeah.
And see where that takes me. This one on the motorcycle, to me, it's learning something new at my age, learning, how to ride a motorcycle, and it's interesting that these motorcycles, the ones I'm looking at, they don't have any gears. They're just throttle.
Yep.
So, at least, that was always one of my big things when I fool around on one of my buddies' motorcycles would be, I'd always blow it when I was shifting gears. Was it 1 up, 1 down, 4 up, whatever. And I'd stall the thing, My most experience I've had on any type of motorized two-wheeler is when I was 13, 14 years old, 15, I had a Sears mini bike, that had 2.5 horsepower, centrifugal clutch, no gears. But so it's been a long time since I've ridden a motorcycle.
Wow.
It's going to be something new.
There you go. So obviously when you're on this trip, surely you're going to be expecting to encounter any kind of particular people, any kind of YouTube people that you might know, or events that you might be coinciding with, any kind of anything like that?
Well, yeah, once I get the route more dialed, I'm going to, of course, reach out and see if there's people I know along the way, be it personal friends or YouTube style people. The one thing I tell everybody about all the trips I've done is the best part of these trips is the people you meet along the way and things that just happen to you. We were on the electric Volkswagen trip. My buddy and I were cruising along. We're just west of Cleveland, and we get a phone call. This guy named Tom Summers from San Diego who had been following our journey. He calls us up out of the blue and says, "Hey, I see you guys are just west of Cleveland." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, myself and some friends who have been working on getting the the Woodstock bus restored and inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." He says, "We're at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame today. Why don't you guys come and meet us? And we'll get you in." So, all right, we'll be there in, an hour and a half. And, we pull up in, front of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They come out and give us some passes. We go in, we get to take some pictures with this famous, the Woodstock bus, which is, you can see in the movie, you can see it on the album cover. And,
that's
just
awesome.
Stuff like that, that things that just happen.
Happen spontaneous. Would you say it's more physically or mentally demanding?
It varies, and sometimes it's really both are equally. For example, on the I'll go back to the start when I did the pushes on a skateboard across America. The way that works is one guy starts skating, the support vehicle would drive out 3 to 4 miles in front and park. Another skater would get out and take off. The support vehicle would wait for the first skater. And when he got there, he'd jump in and they would drive 3 miles out further, passing that second skater. So you do that rotation all day long. Each skater, depending on terrain, is skating 35 to 50 miles a day. So you're getting breaks along the way. So you do your turn, you wait for 2 guys to skate, and then it's your turn again. And, it's demanding, but you know that you're getting a break.
Mm-hmm.
So on the electric skateboard, it was a whole different ballgame. Even though it was physically demanding as far as pushing, it wasn't as difficult. It did have its own difficulty, though, because you're just standing on this board that's moving, and your lower legs kind of go numb.
Yeah.
So I would get off the board every few miles and walk around, because I knew if something happened and I had to bail, my feet weren't going to work and I was going to crash. But it was also very mentally demanding, because you have to, when I did the push on the skateboard, you weren't on the board for, you were on the board for, 15, 20 minutes at a time. When I did the electric board, I'm on this board all day long myself. And to keep mentally aware of traffic, you guys know, on motorcycles, being aware of the traffic.
Yeah.
And I kind of got to the point, I tried to wear a mirror, but it didn't work out. So I was just constantly looking back, turning around and looking back to see if there's traffic. And I got to the point where I could tell if I looked back and I saw a car a certain distance behind, I had like an internal timer that I developed in my head where I could, okay, that guy should have been here by now.
Mm-hmm.
So, if he wasn't, I'd take another look and like, okay, what's this guy doing?
Yeah.
So one thing that I did on the electric board, and even did it on the electric bike trip, is I wear a little day pack when I'm riding, and I hung a little yellow sign off the bottom of it, and it said, big letters, thanks, with an arrow pointing like, okay, hey, move over and give me some room. And I have to say, 95% of the people who had an opportunity to move over into the other lane, or just, move over a few feet, did. So that made it nice to have people giving you a little bit of buffer there.
Yeah, that is nice. That is nice. And jumping back to what we were just talking about, as far as the trip and meeting people and all that kind of good stuff, are you going to document your journey like on Instagram or on YouTube or something like that, so that people do know where you're at on certain days? Because you're traveling, 4,000 miles. So
yeah, we'll definitely do that. We'll be on both Instagram, Facebook, and if, depending on what other company, which motorcycle company gets involved, they'll probably want, to have their own, they'll be promoting it as well, to get people to watch this. And that was, jump back to like the first few times I did this, it was especially that first trip, because there was no email, there was no Instagram, there was no YouTube. So we were just out there, especially in 76 and 84. We would, the way that worked is, and long distance calls were very expensive back then. So one of us would call home every few days, and then that parent would call the other parents and say, okay, hey, they're okay. They're here. As far as meeting people, probably it was a weird way to meet someone, but probably the most interesting thing that happened to us is in 1984. We had just come out of Yellowstone Park. We were on the east side of Yellowstone Park heading towards Cody, Wyoming. Okay. And two of us were in the car. We were driving to catch up with the skater who was in front of us. And we're on a little 2-lane highway. We come to this bridge. As we're approaching this bridge, all of a sudden this woman runs up in front of us and blocks, screaming at us to stop. And we were driving a Dodge van for that trip, and it was all lettered. So when we pulled over, she just looked distraught. What's going on? And are you the ambulance? She thought we looked like an ambulance. And we're like, no, what, how can we help you? And she goes, I think my daughter just drowned.
What?
And so right about that time, this cowboy looking guy comes up out of this creek bed with a little 2-year-old girl in his arms. And she looks dead. She's blue. But turns out she was breathing. And we just said, get in the car, get in the van.
Yeah.
And she was so freaked out that she said, but we'll get your van muddy. And my buddy driving the van, because I jumped out. He's like, he said, get the F in the van. We'll take you to Cody. And so they just take off to Cody. They get a little bit down the road, and the little girl has stopped breathing again.
Oh my gosh.
But right at that time, my friend who's driving, Paul, he sees a sheriff car just driving the other way, just on routine patrol. Paul pulls and blocks the road, makes the sheriff stop. And the sheriff at first is kind of freaked out. It's like, what are you doing? And then they jump out of the car and it's like, look, we may have a drowning, victim here. So they put her on the side of the road. They start doing CPR. And then right at that time, a doctor on family vacation heading towards Yellowstone comes upon this scene. He pulls over, jumps out, kind of takes over what's going on. And then he of course radios for help, and eventually an ambulance shows up. They get her in the ambulance. They take her to Cody. So here we are on the side of the road. Paul's on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when he was driving the van, he went flying by one of our guys skating, and the guy skating had no clue. Like, why is the van hauling ass past me and not stopping? So he turns around, comes back, finds us on the side of the road, and we still had 40 miles to skate that day. So we continue skating. We eventually get to Cody, and we have dinner. It's like, hey, let's go to the hospital and see what happens, see if we can find out anything. The little girl made it. As we get to the hospital, just as we're walking in, the mother's running out. And she's like, oh, you guys, thanks so much for your help. And we're like, well, how's your daughter? What's going on? And she said, well, they just put her on a life flight helicopter for Salt Lake City. So that's all we knew. There was a newspaper article, and back in those days, of course, there was no internet. So the way we found out, we got copies of newspapers, was we would give any reporter who did a story with us, we would give them a self-addressed, self-stamped envelope. And when they wrote the article, they'd send us, put in the envelope, send it to us. So eventually we got home and the articles, didn't really give us, they said, the outcome was, even the newspaper reporters said, yeah, it was kind of funny. One of the newspaper reporters said, and a group of 4 young men skateboarding across the country, happened upon the scene and were helpful in in this hopeful rescue.
Yeah.
But that was it. So that's 1984.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So now flash forward to 2011. One of the fellows on the trip that year was my buddy Gary Fluitt, and he's living in Colorado. He's getting ready to move home back to California, and he's cleaning out his basement. And he comes across one of those newspaper articles.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I wonder what happened to that little girl. I wonder if she made it. And Gary at the time was working for Google, so he knew how to really,
right.
dig into things. So he starts, the girl's family name was mentioned in the article, as was her first name, and that they were from the Salt Lake City area. So he starts snooping around, trying to figure out who this girl was and if she had made it. He finds a young woman in the Salt Lake City area, about the right age, same name. He digs around, finds an email address, sends her an email. 3 or 4 months go by. Here's nothing. Forgets about it again. And then one day, 4 months later, he gets an email. And it says, Dear Gary, she says, I'm very surprised I was very surprised today when I opened my email to see your email. She said, because I don't use this email account anymore. The only reason I came on today was to close it. And then she said, I am that little girl. She said, thank you and your friends for helping save my life. She said, luckily, I had no ill effects from the near drowning. She says, I'm a newspaper reporter myself now, and she had just finished her first novel. And so Gary sends me the email. I'm sitting at my desk one evening, and I get it, and I read. He copied what she had written, and I read through it once, and then I try to read it to my wife, and I lose it about halfway through and just start crying.
Yeah.
I mean, I get choked up now.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And it's really an amazing set of whatever you want to call it, coincidence, divine intervention, I don't know. But that morning, every morning we would start skating pretty much as soon as the sun came up. That morning when we were on the western side of Yellowstone. It's raining, so we have to wait. We had to wait like an hour for the roads to dry up and the rain to quit. So we start skating. We get to the western entrance of Yellowstone, and we knew that you weren't allowed to ride skateboards in Yellowstone. So we got in the car or in the van, drove up, paid it at the the gate, drove about a mile in, and then started skating again. We get busted, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, hey, we're busted. Let's go over and see Old Faithful. So we drive over to Old Faithful. We get there. It had just went off. All right, well, we'll just walk around, look at some things. We'll come back and see it 50 minutes later or whatever the eruption time was. We get back. We missed it again.
Oh.
So we like, screw it. We're just going to sit here and wait for this thing to go off. And so we sat around, waited for it to do its thing. And then went on our way, drove to the eastern edge of Yellowstone and started skating, and then so that put us at the right place at the right time. And then the sheriff showing up and then the doctor showing up, all this stuff happened. And the little girl lived.
It's a
pretty crazy story.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Everything really happens for a reason sometimes, huh? That's insane.
I think so.
That is insane. No, it's crazy what stuff can happen on the road sometimes. And that one trip, and you got a story there that is a happy ending and it lasts a lifetime. And to be able to connect with the young lady afterwards, after so many years, is a beautiful thing.
One of the kind of a funny story that happened in 76, we were in Wisconsin, and one of the guys, Mike, was skating, on some county road, and he gets pulled over by a policeman. Mm-hmm. I think it was a local sheriff, and he says, "You can't skate here. You can't skate on my road." Okay, so we didn't want to argue with the guy. So when we caught up to him in the car, we just got in the car and drove north until we found another east-west road outside of this guy's county, and kept skating. No big deal. In 84, we're skating through Wisconsin. We come around the turn, and there's one of our skaters pulled over by the same sheriff 8 years later.
No.
And he's like, 10, he had the dates wrong, but he's like, 10 years ago, some guys came through here skating across the country, and I told them they couldn't skate on my road. And we just started laughing. I said, "You're the same guy." So we, did the same thing. But I got to tell you, phenomenal, because you always hear these stories about skaters and law enforcement. Mm-hmm. We had nothing but support. The only time we ever got told we couldn't skate on that road or on a road was the time in Wisconsin, and then one time in Virginia on the last day, but we found another route. Policemen would pull over. Remember we get one time in Ohio, just as we crossed into the Ohio border, a police woman and then a state patrolman showed up. They'd gotten some phone calls or information that we were out there skating, and that they pulled us over and they got out their maps and showed us, why don't you guys go over here to this road? You're going to have less traffic, And so we had nothing but, support.
Good interactions,
really.
Huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. So, riding from coast to coast on an electric motorcycle, how do you think that's going to, what do you think the impact of electric motorcycles, motor vehicles, do you think they're going to be around forever? You think this is going to be an impactful thing to do to promote electric vehicles?
Yeah, I just think, that if people I have interaction with will see that, you can take longer trips in electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of that, especially on the electric, when we did the electric Volkswagen. The first question out of everybody's mouth is, "What's your range?"
Right.
Mm-hmm. And, we had about a 200-mile range in this. So I think it's just going to, do I think electric vehicles are going to take over? No, they're just another way, and the one great comparison is when we did the electric Volkswagen ride across the country, drive across the country, it was very similar to when the first guy drove a car across America in 1903. He had to find gasoline. There were no gas stations in 1903. He would go to hardware stores and buy kerosene he would go to farmers and get, gas that they were maybe using in some type of vehicle on their farm. And it was kind of the same way with electricity. It's like we had to really plan our route to where we could find a place to charge. And that's where I think electric vehicles are today,
Mm-hmm.
and it's getting better, is there's getting to be more infrastructure
Right.
for charging.
Yeah.
Just like in the early 1900s, there was very little infrastructure for, even gasoline-powered vehicles.
Right.
What's the one item you won't leave home without on this trip? If you thought about one item.
Well, of course, a phone, but I don't know, probably a sleeping bag in case we get stuck someplace and we have to sleep on the side of the road. It was funny when I did the electric bike ride. I started off with all this stuff in my trailer. I was pulling a trailer for the first half of the trip, and I had a sleeping bag, I had a tent, I had tools, and by the time I got to Nebraska, I decided, even before I got to Nebraska, I decided I'm not going to camp. The only
Mhm.
camping I'm doing is going to be in a motel room. So it's funny, a buddy of mine who was traveling back across the United States, we met up in Nebraska, and I gave him my tent and my sleeping bag and said, take this home. And it lightened up my load a little bit.
Okay, so you're going on a long journey, 4,000 miles. And how long do you think it's going to take you?
I've been looking at what guys have done, and some of the guys have done it I've seen 20 some days to guys doing it, taking a little over a month. And then some guys, have break it up into different sections. I'd like to do it all in one push. And my goal is, around the 30-day mark.
Okay. So at the end of that 30 days, weird question for you, but you do the 4,000 miles, 30 days, you're tired, and you have to have dinner with someone. Who would you want to have dinner with at the end of your journey, living or dead?
I'll give it to you two ways. First one would be my wife, of course, because she lets me do this crazy
No,
stuff.
we can't count your wife.
Okay. I guess it would be probably George Wyman, the first guy to do it on a motorcycle. That guy was incredible.
Yeah.
There were hardly any roads when he did his trip in 1903. He was riding a glorified bicycle. It had a 1.5 horsepower belt drive. That was his power. He rode about 50% of his time on railroad tracks, not next to the railroad track, right on the ties. I don't know how the bike stayed together. And every once in a while, when I was on my electric bike ride, I'd come to a railroad crossing and I'd stop and look and go, no way.
Yeah, they're brutal.
And and the roads he was on were mainly, unpaved. They get muddy. He had to deal with. He was a good mechanic too. He had to deal with all kinds of breakdowns, everything from broken spokes to he kept snapping his drive belt. He ended up actually pedaling the last 150 miles because the engine wasn't running. So that guy would be, I would love to have been able to sit down and talk with that guy and really, because there's not that much information. He wrote some articles it was called Motorcycle Magazine back in the early 1900s. And of course, I've read those. There's a group called the George Wyman Project who they raise funds and they go and they put plaques along his journey. And I actually found a couple of them along the way. And they're trying to, because what happened was George actually finished 20 days before the guys in the car did. And they didn't even know each other were doing this. It wasn't a race or anything. And he got a little bit of fanfare, but as soon as the guys in the car did it, nobody cared about George on his motorcycle anymore because most people they're going to go across the country. They're going to drive a car.
Right. Yeah.
So he was kind of lost to the hands of time over the years.
Well, Jack, it's been awesome having you on. Rhoads, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you so much.
Oh,
So many great stories.
thank you guys.
Yeah,
And
no,
I'll be hitting you up soon.